Richard, we've decided to restructure the sales department. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. My boss, Gloria, couldn't even look me in the eyes as she delivered the news. The HR director beside her slid a manila envelope across the table containing my termination papers. My name is Richard Harmon, 58 years old, and until that Thursday morning, I had been Senior Vice President of Sales at Westlake Pharmaceuticals in Boston, Massachusetts. For a quarter century, I'd built the company's revenue from $15 million to over $600 million annually. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I felt my face remain perfectly composed as I nodded once. I understand, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. 25 years of loyalty, thousands of closed deals, millions in commissions, and it ended with a 10-minute meeting scheduled suspiciously at 4:50 p.m. I stood, straightened my tie, and walked out without another word. No protests, no questions. Just quiet dignity that I could see unsettled them both. The younger sales team members averted their eyes as I walked through the open office area toward my corner office, or what had been my corner office for the past 15 years. News travels instantly in sales departments. These were people I'd personally hired, trained, and mentored. Some owed their entire careers to opportunities I'd created for them. Now, they couldn't bear to meet my gaze. Jason, my most recent hire, and protégé, followed me into my office and closed the door. "Richard, this is insane. What happened?" His face was flushed with genuine outrage. I appreciated the loyalty, but I knew better than to drag him into what was coming. "It's just business," I replied calmly as I began collecting personal items. From my desk, the Crystal Award I'd received for breaking the company's sales record 3 years running. The fountain pen my wife Catherine had given me on our 20th anniversary. The small leather-bound notebook where I documented every major client interaction for the past decade. "But that new guy, Elliot, has only been here 9 months, Jason continued. "He doesn't know half of what you know about our clients, our products." I held up my hand to stop him. "Jason, listen to me carefully. Don't make waves. Keep your head down and watch what happens next." I lowered my voice. "And make sure you keep detailed records of everything." His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded, understanding there was more happening than appeared on the surface. Smart kid. He'd go far if Westlake didn't destroy itself first. As I packed the last of my belongings into a cardboard box, Gloria appeared at my door. "Security will escort you out," she said, a corporate mercenary doing her job. "That won't be necessary," I replied. "I know the way after 25 years. Her face reddened slightly. We both knew the security escort was excessive. A power play designed to humiliate. It's company policy for terminated executives. I smiled thinly. "Of course it is." The security guard, Miguel, had been with the company for nearly 20 years himself. I'd helped him get his son an internship in our marketing department 3 summers ago. Now he was forced to walk me to the exit like a criminal. "I'm sorry about this, Mr. Harmon," he whispered as we waited for the elevator. "Not your fault, Miguel," I said. "How's Roberto doing at Northeastern? Graduating this spring, got a job lined up at a tech firm already. Good, tell him I'm proud." In the parking garage, I placed my box in the trunk of my BMW and sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'd been expecting this, hadn't I? The signs had been there for months, ever since Thomas Reynolds had been appointed CEO after the board pushed out Martin Gladwell. Martin had been an old-school leader who valued relationships and institutional knowledge. Thomas was from the new breed, data-driven, ruthlessly focused on quarterly returns, uninterested in anyone or anything that couldn't be readily quantified in an analytics dashboard. The fact that I'd built relationships with our top 100 clients over decades meant nothing to him. The fact that doctors trusted my word on new medications because I'd never sold them something that didn't work meant nothing. All he saw was my salary and my age. I started the engine and drove past the gleaming glass headquarters that had been my professional home for 25 years. The massive Westlake Pharmaceuticals logo illuminated the night sky, a logo I'd watched change. Through 3 redesigns, I'd outlasted 4 CEOs, 7 marketing directors and countless reorganizations, until today. They had no idea what I knew, no idea what was coming. I took the scenic route home, driving along the harbor as the last light faded from the sky. The weight of what had happened was sinking in, but instead of despair, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to be in the office before 7 a.m. tomorrow. I didn't have 70 unread emails waiting for my attention. I didn't have quarterly projections to worry about. Catherine was cooking when I walked in the door of our Brookline Victorian, the house we'd bought when our daughter Emma was just starting elementary school. Emma was now 30, with 2 children of her own. Catherine looked up from the stove, her smile fading as she saw the box in my arms. "It happened," she said, not a question. I nodded, setting the box on the kitchen island. They brought in HR, made it quick. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and poured me a glass of the Macallan 18 we saved for special occasions. 25 years, she murmured, sliding the glass across the counter. Did they at least have the decency to look ashamed? Gloria couldn't look me in the eye. Elliot wasn't even there. He's the one who's been angling for my position since he arrived. I took a sip of the scotch, letting the warmth spread through my chest. They'll regret it, Catherine arched an eyebrow. In our 32 years of marriage, she'd never heard me talk like this. I'd always been the consummate professional, the reliable one, the steady hand that guided the sales team through every crisis. What are you planning, Richard? Nothing illegal, I assured her. Just illuminating. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Dinner's ready. You can tell me everything after we eat. Another reason I'd loved this woman for 3 decades. She understood the importance of proper timing. Over roast chicken and asparagus, I told Catherine about the past 6 months. The gradual sidelining, the meetings I wasn't invited to, the subtle transfer of my key accounts to Elliot Davidson, the 36-year-old wunderkind Thomas had brought in from a competitor. But they missed something crucial, I said, refilling our wineglasses. 3 things, actually. Catherine leaned forward. I'm listening. First, I've kept meticulous records of every client interaction, every sale, every promise made for 25 years. Not just the official CRM entries that the company owns, my own detailed notes. Names of doctors' children, hospital administrators' concerns, research directors' priorities, things that never made it into the official system. Your little leather notebooks, Catherine nodded. She teased me about those for years, my old-fashioned habit in a digital world. Second, I was the one who designed most of our current sales tracking systems when we digitized 10 years ago. I know how the data flows, what gets captured, what doesn't, and more importantly, what gets hidden. This raised her eyebrows. Hidden? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And third, I continued, Thomas and Elliot don't actually understand our business. They see numbers, not relationships. They don't realize that in pharmaceuticals, especially with hospital systems and research institutions, trust takes decades to build and seconds to destroy. After dinner, I went to my home office, the small room overlooking our garden, where I'd spent countless Sundays preparing for the week ahead. From the back of the bookshelf, I retrieved a hard drive I'd been updating weekly for the past year. Call it insurance, call it prudence, but something in my gut had told me to prepare. I connected it to my personal laptop and began reviewing the files, sales data, internal emails, meeting minutes, nothing stolen, all information I had legitimate access to as SVP of sales. But compiled together, they told a story that the board of directors needed to see. The trouble had started approximately 18 months ago, when Thomas Reynolds joined as CEO. Westlake had always prided itself on ethical pharmaceutical sales. We sold products that worked, we didn't oversell capabilities, we didn't push doctors to prescribe unnecessarily. Our reputation for integrity was our biggest asset in an industry often viewed with suspicion. Thomas had brought a different philosophy. In his first month, he'd launched a new incentive structure that rewarded sales, volume above all else. Then came the pressure to push our latest diabetes medication, glycontrol, for off-label uses, applications not approved by the FDA. I'd pushed back hard in executive meetings, pointing out both the ethical and legal risks. The fines are just a cost of doing business, Thomas had said dismissively. Every pharma company pays them, not Westlake, not until now. I documented my concerns in emails that had been increasingly ignored. I'd watched as Elliott's team began using sales tactics that skirted regulatory boundaries. Lavish, educational trips for doctors, speaking fees that looked suspiciously like kickbacks, promotional materials that overstated efficacy. Most disturbingly, I discovered something 3 months ago that had kept me up at night ever since. Our newest blockbuster drug, CardioFlow, had shown concerning side effects in a small post-approval study. Nothing definitively dangerous, but enough that doctors should be informed to monitor patients carefully. Thomas and the medical director had decided to bury the report, dismissing it as statistically insignificant. I'd quietly made sure that my own team advised doctors to watch for these potential issues, framing it as an abundance of caution rather than directly contradicting the company line. I'd also saved a copy of the original study data. At my desk now, I organized the information chronologically. The story it told was clear. Under Thomas Reynolds' leadership, Westlake Pharmaceuticals had begun a dangerous slide from ethical industry leader to just another pharmaceutical company willing to cut corners for profit. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Reynolds announced restructuring at emergency meeting. Your territory split between Elliott and me. Everyone shocked. Need to talk. I replied simply, not on company devices. Tomorrow, Cambridge Brewing Company, noon. Another text arrived, this one from Martin Gladwell, the former CEO. Just heard, absolute disgrace. Call me. I would, but not yet. First, I needed to be strategic. Catherine appeared at the office door with a cup of tea. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's soon enough to plan your next move. She was right, as usual. I shut down the laptop and followed her to bed, my mind still racing with possibilities. Morning came with the strange sensation of not having to rush through my usual routine. For the first time in decades, I savored a second cup of coffee, read the newspaper front to back, and took a long walk through the neighborhood. The cherry trees were beginning to bloom, something I normally only caught glimpses of through the car window on my way to early meetings. By 11:30, I was seated at a corner table in Cambridge Brewing Company, a location I'd chosen carefully, far enough from Westlake to avoid running into other employees, but public enough that Jason wouldn't feel uncomfortable. He arrived precisely at noon, looking harried. They've gone crazy, he said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from me. Reynolds called an all-hands this morning to announce a new era in sales strategy. They're pushing hard on CardioFlow, and the new incentive structure is ridiculous. Bonuses for volume, regardless of appropriate prescribing practices. I nodded, having anticipated this. And Elliott? Strutting around like he owns the place. He's been given your office already. Started removing the regional sales directors who were loyal to you. Sarah's gone. Michael's been demoted. And you? I asked, studying his face. Promoted, technically. I'm taking over the Northeast Territory, but it feels tainted. He hesitated. Richard, there's something else. They've changed the reporting structure for side effect monitoring. It's all going through marketing now instead of medical affairs. This was worse than I'd expected. Marketing controlling adverse. Event reporting was not just unethical, it was potentially illegal. Jason's eyes widened at the gravity of my request. You're talking about the new adverse event protocols, right? The ones that funnel everything through marketing first. Exactly. I need documented proof of how they're screening reports before they reach medical affairs or regulatory. Can you get that for me without raising suspicions? He nodded slowly. I have access to the shared drive where they keep the processed documents. I can download them during the all-hands meeting tomorrow when everyone will be distracted. Perfect. I pushed a sealed envelope across the table. And I need you to get this to Dr. Patel. Hand it to him directly, not his assistant. Tell him it's about cardioflow post-approval data. The head of medical affairs? That's risky, Richard. More risky than letting patients experience preventable side effects, I asked quietly. That landed as intended. Jason had joined Westlake for the same reason I had stayed all these years, because we believed in the company's mission to improve lives. I'll get it to him today. After Jason left, I sat nursing my beer, contemplating my next moves. I hadn't been entirely forthcoming with my protégé about everything I knew. The cardioflow data was concerning enough, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. What truly disturbed me were the patterns I'd discovered in the financial reports. Patterns that suggested systematic deception that went beyond aggressive sales tactics. For 3 consecutive quarters, Westlake had reported sales growth that outpaced inventory depletion. On its face, this could be explained by stockpiling at distribution centers, but my decades in pharmaceutical sales told me otherwise. Hospitals and pharmacies operated on increasingly lean inventories these days, a practice I'd actually helped them implement over the years to reduce waste and expired medications. Something wasn't adding up. The numbers Thomas Reynolds was proudly presenting to Wall Street analysts couldn't be reconciled with the actual product moving through our supply chain, and I suspected that Elliot Davidson was somehow at the center of it. My phone rang, Martin Gladwell, the former CEO, calling again. This time I answered. Richard, finally. This is unconscionable. 25 years of service and they escort you out like a criminal. I've already called 3 board members. I appreciate that, Martin, but I need you to hold off on raising more alarms right now. A pause. You're planning something. I'm gathering information. There's more happening at Westlake than a simple changing of the guard. Did you notice anything unusual about the financial reporting in your last months as CEO? Another pause, longer this time. Reynolds was pushing for more aggressive recognition of sales. I pushed back. Is that what this is about? Partly. I need access to the full board, Martin. Not just a sympathetic ear, but a formal presentation. That won't be easy. Reynolds has them convinced that the company needed refreshing, that the old guard, meaning people like you and me, were holding Westlake back from its true potential. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for possible. Martin sighed. The audit committee meets next Tuesday. Margaret Chen still chairs it. I can speak with her, but you'll need something substantive, Richard. Something they can't dismiss as the grievances of a terminated employee. I'll have it by Tuesday. Just get me in the room. After hanging up, I drove to the Boston Public Library, a place where I could work anonymously without leaving digital footprints. From a public computer, I logged into an email account I'd created years ago for competitive intelligence gathering, one that couldn't be traced back to me or Westlake. I sent carefully worded emails to 3 former colleagues who had left Westlake for competitors in the past year. No direct accusations, just questions about whether they'd observed any unusual sales practices or reporting discrepancies before their departures. Then I headed to the financial district to meet with someone who could help make sense of what I was seeing in the numbers. Calvin Matthews had been Westlake's CFO before retiring 5 years ago. We'd worked closely together during the company's major expansion phase, and I trusted his integrity implicitly. The upscale steakhouse where we met was dimly lit, affording privacy for business discussions. Calvin greeted me with a firm handshake and genuine concern. "Richard, I couldn't believe it when I heard. What the hell is Reynolds thinking? You're the backbone of that sales organization." "Was," I corrected, sliding into the booth across from him. "And I think I know why they wanted me gone." Over drinks, I outlined what I'd discovered so far, showing him key spreadsheets on my tablet. Calvin studied them in silence, his former CFO's precision evident in the methodical way he examined each figure. "Channel stuffing," he said finally, looking up. "They're booking revenue for product that's being pushed to distributors but isn't reaching end customers." "That's illegal," I said. "It's a grey area if disclosed properly, which I'm guessing they're not doing. But this pattern here," he pointed to a particular section, "suggests something more concerning. These regional variations don't make sense unless they're recording phantom sales that never happened at all." I finished his thought. Calvin nodded grimly. "Richard, if you're right about this, it goes beyond aggressive sales tactics or even ethical lapses. This is securities fraud." The weight of his words settled between us. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed by someone with Calvin's expertise made it real. "I need to build an airtight case before going to the board," I said. "Something they can't ignore or explain away. You'll need more than just these pattern discrepancies. You'll need documentation of how the fraud is actually being executed, who's involved, how they're doing it, where the authorizations are, or coming from." I thought of Jason and his access to the company's systems. "I may have a way to get that." Calvin leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Be careful, Richard. If Reynolds and his people are manipulating financial statements to this degree, they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens to expose them." "They already tried to destroy me professionally," I replied. "They miscalculated." Back at home that evening, Catherine listened intently as I explained what I'd learned. Unlike many spouses who might have counseled caution or walking away, she understood immediately why this mattered so deeply to me. "Westlake was never just a job to you," she said, squeezing my hand across the kitchen counter. "It was a mission. Those medications help real people, people like my father." Catherine's father had survived an aggressive form of prostate cancer, largely thanks to one of Westlake's earlier oncology drugs. That personal connection had always strengthened my commitment to the company's integrity. If they're falsifying sales data, it's not just about cooking the books, I explained. It eventually leads to cutting corners on quality, pushing medications for inappropriate uses, hiding side effects. People get hurt. So what's your next step? "I need concrete evidence of how they're executing the fraud. Jason is helping, but there's someone else who might have crucial information." I dialed a number I rarely used. Rachel Dawson had been Westlake's controller until 3 months ago, when she'd suddenly resigned for personal reasons. At the time, I'd thought little of it, absorbed in my own challenges with the new regime. "Richard Harmon," she answered, surprise evident in her voice. "I heard what happened. Despicable after everything you've done for that company." "Thanks, Rachel. I'm calling because I think I might understand why you really left Westlake." Silence stretched across the line. Finally, "Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow at the Museum of Fine Arts, 11 a.m. by the Monet exhibit." The next morning I arrived early, taking time to wander through the museum's European collection. There had been precious few moments for cultural appreciation during my decades building Westlake's sales operation. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took being fired to rediscover such simple pleasures. Rachel appeared precisely at 11, dressed casually but with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her an excellent controller. Her expression was guarded as we found a quiet bench away from other visitors. I left because I was being pressured to certify financial statements I knew contained misrepresentations, she said without preamble. Reynolds and that new sales director Davidson had implemented what they called revenue acceleration strategies. In reality, they were recording sales that hadn't actually happened yet, or might never happen. I need details, Rachel. Specific mechanisms. She glanced around before continuing. They created a parallel reporting system. The official ERP system contained the actual sales data, but they built a separate database for projected sales conversions. When reporting to Wall Street, they used figures from this secondary system. That's blatant fraud. It gets worse. They were creating fake purchase orders from major hospital systems, backdated documents that made it appear certain sales had closed in the current quarter when they were still in negotiation or had been declined. My mind flashed to several accounts that had mysteriously been transferred from my team to Elliott's over the past 6 months. Now it made sense. They needed control over relationships with those customers to ensure no one contradicted their false narrative. "Do you have evidence?" I asked. Rachel hesitated, then reached into her bag and handed me a thumb drive. "I made copies before I left. I was planning to take this to the SEC, but I was afraid. Whistleblowers often find their careers destroyed, even with legal protections." I pocketed the drive. "Thank you. This could be crucial." "What are you planning to do?" "Build a comprehensive case and present it to the board before going to regulators. They need a chance to correct course." She nodded. "I always respected that about you, Richard. Even now, you're trying to save the company rather than burn it down." Westlake is more than Reynolds and Davidson. It's hundreds of dedicated employees and thousands of patients who rely on our medications. They deserve better. When I returned home, I found an encrypted email waiting from Jason. "Completed both tasks. Dr. P, very concerned. Wants to meet you. Also found something else you need to see. Tonight?" I replied with a location. A 24-hour diner near the hospital district, unlikely to be frequented by Westlake employees. At 9 p.m. I claimed a booth in the back, ordering coffee while I waited. Jason arrived 20 minutes later, looking over his shoulder as he slid into the seat opposite me. "I think I'm being paranoid, but everything feels different at Westlake now, like we're suddenly in a spy thriller." "You're not paranoid. What did you find?" He extracted a flash drive from his jacket pocket. "The adverse event reporting protocols are even worse than we thought. Marketing has instituted a significance threshold before reports reach medical affairs. They're filtering out what they call noise in the data. Illegal," I said flatly, "and dangerous, but there's more." He slid a folder across the table. "I was going through the sales projection models for the Northeast region, my new territory, and found these discrepancies. We're reporting sales to Baltimore Memorial that never happened. I checked with my contact there directly." I examined the documents. The fraud was even more brazen than I'd suspected. "How did Dr. Patel react to the information I sent?" "He was stunned. Said he'd been deliberately kept out of loops on the post-approval cardioflow data, asked specifically for you to call him at home, not his office line." Jason passed me a handwritten note with a phone number. "You're taking significant risks helping me, Jason. You understand that?" He met my gaze steadily. "You gave me my start at Westlake when every other company rejected me. Said you saw potential where others saw inexperience. I believe in what this company is supposed to stand for, Richard, not what Reynolds is turning it into." The conviction in his voice reminded me of myself 25 years earlier, when I joined a small pharmaceutical company with big ambitions and ethical standards to match. That version of Westlake was worth fighting for. Be careful, document everything, but keep your head down, don't raise any alarms. After Jason left, I called Dr. Patel from a payphone I'd located earlier, old school, but secure. "Richard, thank you for reaching out," he answered immediately. "I've reviewed the cardioflow data you provided. This is deeply concerning. The cardiovascular complications rate is significantly higher than what was presented to me by Reynolds' team. Are patients at risk? With proper monitoring, the risks can be managed, but physicians need to know to watch for these specific indicators. The current prescribing information doesn't adequately flag these concerns. What are you planning to do?" A heavy sigh. "I've drafted updated clinical guidelines, but Reynolds rejected them, saying they would create unnecessary market anxiety. I'm being systematically sidelined, Richard. My medical team has been reduced by half in the latest restructuring. The board's audit committee is meeting Tuesday. I'll be presenting evidence of financial irregularities. Your concerns should be part of that presentation. I'll prepare a comprehensive medical assessment, but Richard, be prepared. Reynolds has the board convinced that he's modernizing a stagnant company. They may not be receptive. They will be when they see what I'm bringing." The weekend was spent in meticulous preparation. Catherine helped me organize the mountain of evidence into a clear, compelling narrative. Rachel's financial documents, Jason's adverse event protocols, Dr. Patel's medical assessments, and my own meticulously maintained records of client interactions and sales practices. What emerged was a disturbing picture of a company being hollowed out from within, its ethical foundations replaced with short-term profit schemes, its commitment to patient welfare subordinated to quarterly earnings targets. Sunday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Watch your back. Reynolds knows you're meeting the board Tuesday." A friend. I showed it to Catherine, who immediately looked concerned. "Should we be worried about your safety?" "I don't think Reynolds would risk anything that dramatic. This is about intimidation." Nevertheless, I backed up all my evidence to 3 separate secure locations and informed Martin Gladwell about the warning. Monday morning brought confirmation that my activities hadn't gone unnoticed. 2 of my former sales directors called to report that Elliot Davidson was questioning them about my record-keeping practices and client relationships. He was fishing for something to discredit me ahead of the board meeting. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at home. Sarah Weiss, the Northeastern Regional Director, who Jason had mentioned was pushed out, stood on my doorstep, looking nervous. "I probably shouldn't be here," she said, as I invited her in. "But I couldn't just do nothing." In my living room, she revealed that Elliot had offered her a substantial severance package with an unusually restrictive confidentiality agreement. They specifically wanted me to sign away rights to discuss any sales practices I observed during my last 6 months at Westlake. "Did you sign it?" "Not yet. They're pressuring me to finalize by tomorrow. Richard, they created fake email trails showing client approvals for orders that never happened, made it look like I had confirmed deals that weren't real. I think they're setting me up as a scapegoat if this ever comes to light." This was a new dimension to the fraud, creating fall guys and silencing potential witnesses. "Do you have documentation of these fabricated emails?" She nodded, producing a folder. "I printed everything before they cut my system access." The time stamps don't make sense. The language doesn't sound like my clients, and in 3 cases, they faked responses from people who weren't even in those roles anymore. "Sarah, this could be critically important. Would you be willing to document this in a sworn statement?" She hesitated, understandably concerned about her career prospects. What happens to Westlake if this all comes out? There are good people there who don't deserve to suffer. The goal isn't to destroy Westlake, but to save it from people who are betraying everything it stands for. The company can survive and rebuild with the right leadership. After careful consideration, she agreed. We spent the next 2 hours preparing her statement, which I had notarized by a friend who came to the house. That evening, as Catherine and I finalized my presentation materials for the board meeting, I received another unexpected call. This one from Margaret Chen, chair of the audit committee. Mr. Harmon, I wanted to speak with you directly before tomorrow's meeting. There have been concerns raised about your motives in requesting this audience. By Thomas Reynolds, I presume. He has suggested that your presentation may be motivated by personal grievances rather than legitimate business concerns. I kept my tone measured and professional. Ms. Chen, I've served Westlake faithfully for 25 years. What I will present tomorrow isn't about my termination. It's about systematic fraud that threatens the company's future and potentially puts patients at risk. I wouldn't waste the board's time or mine with mere complaints about personal treatment. A moment of silence. That's reassuring to hear. I should inform you that Mr. Reynolds has asked to be present during your presentation. This was a tactical move to intimidate me and potentially control the narrative. That's highly inappropriate given the nature of my evidence. He should certainly have an opportunity to respond, but his presence during my initial presentation would inhibit full disclosure. I tend to agree. The committee will hear you privately first, then give Mr. Reynolds an opportunity to address your points. Does that seem fair? Completely. Thank you for your integrity in this matter. As I hung up, Catherine looked at me with a mixture of pride and concern. You've built an airtight case, Richard. But are you prepared for the personal cost? No matter how this goes tomorrow, there will be powerful people who won't forgive you for exposing this. Her question made me pause and reflect on the true motivations driving me. Was this about vindication, revenge for my unceremonious dismissal, or something deeper? 25 years ago, I joined Westlake because I believed in what we were doing, I said finally. We developed medications that changed lives, and we did it with integrity. That company still exists beneath the corruption Reynolds has introduced. Those values still matter. This isn't about my career anymore. It's about everything I've worked for, everything we've built together. Catherine nodded, understanding as she always did. Then let's make sure your presentation is perfect. Tuesday morning arrived clear and crisp. I dressed with particular care. The same suit I'd worn to close Westlake's first 8-figure hospital system contract 15 years earlier. A small gesture of continuity, a reminder of what the company had been and could be again. Catherine straightened my tie. Give them hell, she said simply. The drive to Westlake headquarters felt surreal. Returning to the building I'd helped fill with success, now as an outsider with a visitor's badge. The security guard at the front desk, a man named Paul, who'd been with the company for over a decade, gave me a respectful nod as I signed in. Good to see you, Mr. Harmon, he said quietly. Thank you, Paul. How's your daughter doing at college? His face brightened. Dean's List last semester, that scholarship program you helped expand made it possible. These were the real human connections that made a company more than just a profit machine. The kind of relationships Reynolds and Davidson couldn't quantify in their analytics dashboards. As I rode the elevator to the executive floor, I mentally reviewed my presentation one last time. No emotional appeals, no accusations without documentation, just a clear presentation of facts that would speak for themselves. The board members were intelligent people who understood fiduciary responsibility. They didn't need theatrics, they needed truth. The boardroom was imposing as always, with its panoramic views of Boston Harbor. 5 members of the audit committee waited, expressions carefully neutral as Martin Gladwell made the introductions. Margaret Chen, Howard Blake, Patricia Winters, Samuel Ortiz, and James Peterson, a formidable group with extensive experience in healthcare and finance. Mr. Harmon, Margaret began formally, we've allocated 30 minutes for your presentation, followed by questions. Please proceed. I connected my laptop to the display system and began. Thank you for this opportunity. What I'm about to share with you concerns systematic financial misrepresentations, dangerous patient safety practices, and potential regulatory violations that put Westlake Pharmaceuticals at significant risk. For the next 25 minutes, I laid out the evidence methodically. The falsified sales reports, the manipulated adverse event reporting system, the suppressed cardioflow safety data, the fabricated email trails creating fictional approvals. From customers, I showed them documentation from Rachel Dawson, Sarah Weiss, and Dr. Patel. I demonstrated the statistical impossibility of the sales growth figures Reynolds had been proudly presenting to analysts. Most damaging of all, I revealed the parallel reporting system being used to generate fictional revenue figures while maintaining separate records of actual sales. Throughout my presentation, the board members remained silent, expressions growing increasingly grave. James Peterson, a former pharmaceutical executive himself, removed his glasses several times to rub his eyes in apparent disbelief. This systematic deception appears to have begun approximately 14 months ago, I concluded. It coincides precisely with the implementation of the new executive compensation package that ties bonuses directly to quarterly sales growth. The motivation seems clear, and the consequences for Westlake could be catastrophic if these practices continue. When I finished, the room remained silent for several long moments. These are extremely serious allegations, Margaret finally said. If even half of what you've presented is accurate, we're facing a profound crisis. Everything I've shared is thoroughly documented, I replied, and I believe there's more to uncover if you authorize a proper investigation. Samuel Ortiz, the newest board member and a former FDA official, leaned forward. The adverse event reporting issues alone could trigger regulatory action. Why bring this to us rather than directly to authorities? Because I believe in what Westlake is supposed to be, I answered honestly. This company has helped millions of patients over its history. The corruption is recent and concentrated in specific leadership. With decisive board action, Westlake can correct course and emerge stronger. Patricia Winters nodded slowly. A whistleblower with loyalty to the institution, rare and valuable. We'll need to verify all of this independently, Howard Blake cautioned. Of course, I said, providing them with a flash drive containing all my evidence. Every assertion is backed by documentation with clear sources. I've also included contact information for the individuals who provided statements. Margaret. Chen stood. Mr. Harmon, please wait outside while we confer briefly before speaking with Mr. Reynolds. In the reception area, Martin joined me. That was masterful, Richard. Factual, unemotional, devastating in its clarity. Will it be enough? Margaret's expression tells me it will. I've known her for 20 years. She doesn't suffer fools or frauds. Before he could say more, the boardroom door opened and Margaret beckoned us back in. We've decided to postpone our meeting with Mr. Reynolds, she announced. Instead, we're calling an emergency session of the full board for 2 p.m. today. Mr. Harmon, we'd like you to repeat your presentation at that time. My heart raced. This was more than I'd hoped for. A chance to present directly to all 12 board members without Reynolds having a chance to spin a counter-narrative first. I'd be happy to, I replied, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the surge of vindication I felt. In the meantime, Margaret continued, we're instructing security to secure all relevant records and temporarily restrict system access for Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Davidson pending our investigation. Dr. Patel has been asked to prepare complete information on the cardioflow safety data for immediate distribution to healthcare providers. As I packed up my materials, Howard Blake approached me privately. For what it's worth, Mr. Harmon, I think you've done something extraordinary today. Many in your position would have walked away or sought revenge. You chose to try to save the company instead. I nodded my thanks, words momentarily failing me as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. Outside the boardroom, I took a moment alone in a quiet corner of the reception area. The adrenaline that had carried me through the presentation was beginning to ebb, leaving me suddenly aware of how much this battle had taken out of me. But beneath the fatigue was something I hadn't felt since the day I was terminated. Hope for Westlake's future. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Something's happening. Reynolds and Davidson just escorted from building by security. What did you do? I smiled slightly as I typed my response. Justice, stand by. The boardroom buzzed with tension when I returned at 2 p.m. All 12 members of Westlake's board of directors were present, their expressions ranging from open concern to carefully guarded neutrality. Thomas Reynolds sat at the far end, his face an unconvincing mask of confident dismissal. Elliot Davidson was notably absent. As I set up my presentation, I could feel Reynolds watching me, a predator suddenly realizing he might have misjudged his prey. Margaret Chen called the meeting to order with remarkable composure, considering the gravity of what the audit committee had already heard. Ladies and gentlemen, we've called this emergency session to address serious allegations regarding business practices at Westlake Pharmaceuticals. Mr. Harmon has presented the audit committee with documentation that warrants immediate full board review. Reynolds immediately objected. This is highly irregular. A terminated employee with obvious grievances shouldn't be granted this platform without proper vetting of his claims. The audit committee has reviewed the preliminary evidence, Margaret replied coolly, and deemed it sufficiently credible to warrant this meeting. You'll have your opportunity to respond, Mr. Reynolds. She nodded for me to begin. This time, I expanded my presentation to include additional context I'd held back earlier, detailed analysis of how Westlake's ethical pharmaceutical sales approach had been systematically dismantled over the past 18 months, replaced with practices that prioritized volume over appropriate prescribing. Westlake built its reputation on medical integrity, I explained. Doctors prescribed our medications because they trusted our representatives to be honest about efficacy, contraindications, and potential side effects. That trust translated into market share that competitors couldn't touch, not because we had better marketing, but because we had better relationships. I showed them satisfaction surveys from healthcare providers spanning my 25-year tenure, consistently ranking Westlake's sales team as the most trusted in the industry. Then I displayed the precipitous decline in those same metrics over the past 3 quarters. This isn't just about numbers on spreadsheets, I continued. It's about the fundamental relationship between Westlake and the medical community. A relationship that took decades to build and only months to severely damage. From there, I methodically laid out the evidence of financial manipulation that Rachel Dawson had provided. The parallel reporting systems, the fabricated purchase orders, the pressure placed on financial controllers to certify false statements. Several board members visibly recoiled when I displayed internal emails showing Reynolds and Davidson discussing how to massage quarterly numbers to meet Wall Street expectations. But the most damning evidence came when I presented the suppressed cardioflow safety data. This information was deliberately withheld from prescribing physicians, I explained, displaying Dr. Patel's signed statement. Patients taking cardioflow have experienced cardiovascular complications at a rate significantly higher than disclosed in marketing materials. While not immediately life-threatening when properly monitored, these side effects represent a serious risk profile that doctors and patients have a right to know about. Robert Winters, the longest-serving board member and a cardiologist himself, removed his glasses in obvious distress. "This is unconscionable. I prescribed this medication to my own patients. The proper monitoring protocols exist," I assured him. Dr. Patel developed them based on this data, but his recommendations were shelved by Mr. Reynolds, who deemed them unnecessarily alarming and potentially damaging to sales momentum. Reynolds finally erupted. "This is absurd. You're presenting technical medical information without context, twisting normal business operations into some conspiracy theory because you couldn't adapt to modern sales approaches." I remained calm, refusing to be provoked. "I believe the data speaks for itself, particularly to a board with significant medical expertise, and I'm not finished." The final segment of my presentation focused on the documented retaliation against employees who raised concerns. Sarah Weiss's statement about being set up as a potential scapegoat, Rachel Dawson's forced resignation, Dr. Patel's systematically reduced authority. The pattern was undeniable. When I concluded, the boardroom fell into a heavy silence. Margaret Chen broke it with precise, measured words. "Mr. Reynolds, you now have an opportunity to address these allegations." Reynolds stood, his practiced, executive confidence visibly strained. This is clearly a coordinated attack by former employees unwilling to embrace necessary changes to keep Westlake competitive. The pharmaceutical landscape has evolved dramatically, and our sales and reporting practices simply reflect industry standards. He attempted to dismiss the cardioflow data as statistically insignificant and claimed the financial reporting discrepancies were merely timing differences in how sales were recognized. But his explanations grew increasingly convoluted when confronted with specific documents I'd presented. "What about the parallel reporting system?" Howard Blake asked. "Directly. Are you denying its existence?" Reynolds hesitated just long enough to lose credibility. "We maintain multiple analytical frameworks to examine sales data from different perspectives. That's standard practice. Not when one set of books is used for internal operations and another for investor reporting," Patricia Winters countered sharply. As the questioning intensified, Reynolds' composure cracked. He began blaming subordinates, particularly Elliot Davidson, claiming he wasn't aware of the specific implementation details of sales strategies he had broadly approved. It was the desperate flailing of a man watching his carefully constructed facade crumble. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the patients taking medications without proper safety warnings, the employees whose careers had been sacrificed to maintain the fraud, and my own unceremonious dismissal after 25 years of loyal service. After nearly an hour of increasingly pointed questions, Margaret asked Reynolds to step out while the board deliberated. As he passed me on his way out, he hissed under his breath, "You've made a powerful enemy." I merely nodded. "I've made many over 25 years. I'm still standing." Martin remained in the room as a former CEO, though he recused himself from any vote. His presence was a visible reminder of Westlake's better days. The board's deliberation was remarkably efficient. Robert Winters led the charge, his medical ethics clearly offended by the cardioflow situation. "We have a moral obligation to address this immediately," regardless of the financial or legal implications that follow. Margaret concurred. The evidence of financial misconduct is overwhelming. We have fiduciary duties we cannot ignore. Samuel Ortiz, the former FDA official, added, "The regulatory fallout alone could be devastating if we don't take decisive action now." After 40 minutes of discussion, they reached unanimous agreement on several immediate actions. Margaret asked me to return to hear their decisions. "Mr. Harmon, the board thanks you for bringing these matters to our attention. We've made the following determinations. Thomas Reynolds is suspended effective, immediately pending further investigation. Elliot Davidson is terminated. Dr. Patel is instructed to immediately distribute complete safety information on cardioflow to all healthcare providers." She continued, "We're engaging an independent accounting firm to conduct a forensic audit of our financial statements and external counsel to review all compliance matters. The board will establish a special committee to oversee these investigations, with Martin Gladwell serving as an advisor." I nodded, a profound sense of vindication washing over me. "Thank you for taking these concerns seriously." "There's one more thing," Margaret added. "The board would like to speak with you tomorrow about a potential role in helping Westlake navigate this transition period. Your institutional knowledge and ethical stance would be valuable as we work to correct course." This I hadn't expected. "I appreciate that consideration. I'll be available whenever you need me." As the meeting concluded, several board members approached to thank me personally. Robert Winters gripped my hand firmly. 25 years of service, and in the end, your greatest service may have been this act of courage. Outside the boardroom, Martin embraced me with genuine emotion. "You did it, Richard. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have gotten in that room without you." We walked together to the elevator, passing stunned executives who had clearly heard rumors of the board's emergency session but didn't yet know the outcome. Their expressions reminded me of something I'd learned over decades in sales. The truth always emerges eventually, and attempting to manage by manipulation invariably fails. In the lobby, I spotted Jason waiting anxiously by the security desk. When he saw me, the question in his eyes was obvious. I gave him a subtle thumbs up as I passed, whispering, "I'll call you later." Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed Boston's skyline in golden light. For the first time since my termination, I took a deep breath without the weight of unfinished business pressing on my chest. The battle wasn't over, but a decisive victory had been won. Not just for me, but for the company I'd helped build and the patients who depended on its integrity. Catherine was waiting by her car across the street, having insisted on driving me to this momentous meeting. As I approached, she searched my face for the outcome. "Reynolds is suspended," I said simply. "The board is taking action, all of it." Her smile was radiant as she embraced me. "I never doubted you for a moment." That evening, we celebrated quietly at home with a bottle of champagne we'd been saving for our upcoming anniversary. The phone rang constantly. Former colleagues who had heard rumors, industry contacts offering congratulations or seeking confirmation, even a reporter from a pharmaceutical trade publication fishing for details. I spoke only with Jason, sharing the key developments without revealing confidential board deliberations. "Stay focused on your work," I advised him. "The company is going to need ethical leaders like you more than ever in the coming months." "Oh, what about you?" he asked. "Are you coming back?" "That remains to be seen. The board wants to talk tomorrow." After we hung up, Catherine posed the question that had been lingering unspoken between us. "Do you want to go back, Richard? After how they treated you?" I considered this carefully. Reynolds and Davidson aren't Westlake. The company is hundreds of dedicated employees, life-saving medications, decades of research and development. I don't know if I want my old job back, but I do want to help restore what made Westlake special. She nodded, understanding as always. Just make sure whatever role you consider allows you the balance you never had before. 25 years of 70-hour weeks is enough. Sleep came easily that night, the deep, restful sleep that follows the release of long-carried tension. In the morning, I woke without an alarm for the first time in decades, taking time to enjoy breakfast on our back porch, watching cardinals visit the feeder Catherine had installed years ago, but I'd rarely had time to appreciate. My meeting with the board's executive committee was scheduled for 11 a.m. I arrived early, noting how differently I was treated compared to yesterday. The security guard welcomed me warmly, no visitor badge required. Executives who had avoided eye contact during my departure now offered nods of acknowledgement or even quiet congratulations. Margaret Chen met me personally in the reception area, leading me not to the boardroom, but to a smaller conference room where 4 key board members waited. The atmosphere was markedly different, collaborative rather than confrontational. "Richard, thank you for coming," Margaret began. "Yesterday's revelations have forced us to recognize serious governance failures on our part. The board bears ultimate responsibility for allowing these practices to develop." This candid admission surprised me. Corporate boards rarely acknowledge their own oversight shortcomings so directly. "We're facing significant challenges," she continued. "A potential financial restatement, regulatory scrutiny, rebuilding physician trust. These won't be solved quickly." Robert Winters added, "We need leadership that understands Westlake's history and values, but can also help us move forward with integrity." They outlined their proposal, a new position of Executive Vice President of Corporate Integrity and Sales Excellence, reporting directly to the board until a new CEO could be properly vetted and appointed. The role would combine oversight of sales practices, compliance, and medical information dissemination, essentially ensuring that the company's ethical framework was rebuilt and strengthened. "We're not asking for a short-term commitment," Margaret emphasized. "This transformation will take years, not months." I listened carefully, recognizing both the opportunity and the challenge they were presenting. "Before I consider this, I need to understand something clearly. How did the board miss these issues? What assurance do I have that when difficult decisions arise in the future, decisions that might temporarily impact stock price or growth metrics, the board will support ethical choices?" My directness seemed to surprise them, but Margaret nodded appreciatively. "A fair question. We've already initiated a governance review to examine where our oversight failed. We're implementing expanded reporting requirements that bypass executive management when necessary, and establishing a new ethics committee with direct access to employees at all levels." Samuel Ortiz added, "Yesterday was a wake-up call none of us will forget, Richard. Speaking personally, I joined this board believing in Westlake's reputation for integrity. I'm not just embarrassed. I'm angry that we were misled and determined not to let it happen again." Their sincerity was palpable. Still, I didn't rush to accept. "I appreciate your confidence in me. I'd like to propose some specific conditions for my consideration." For the next hour, we negotiated the parameters of the role. I insisted on complete independence to build my team, including bringing back key people who had been pushed out. I requested direct oversight of how medical information was communicated to healthcare providers. Most importantly, I established clear protocols for raising concerns directly to the board without executive interference. They agreed to everything, adding generous compensation terms that recognized both my experience and the difficult task ahead. By the meeting's end, we had a framework that felt right, challenging but achievable, focused on rebuilding rather than simply punishing. "I'll need the weekend to consider this properly," I said. "This isn't a decision to make without careful thought." Of course, Margaret agreed. We'll prepare the formal offer based on our discussion today. And Richard, regardless of your decision, we owe you our gratitude for your courage in bringing these issues forward. As I left the building, I realized something profound had shifted, not just in Westlake's trajectory, but in my own perspective on my career and legacy. 25 years of sales leadership had taught me to measure success in revenue growth, market share, and deals closed. Now I was contemplating a role focused on something more fundamental, the integrity that makes all other success meaningful. The weekend provided valuable space for reflection. Catherine and I took long walks along the Charles River, discussing the opportunity from every angle. We made pro-con lists, considered alternatives, and talked through what success would look like in this new role. You've always been happiest when building something meaningful, Catherine observed astutely. The question is whether you believe Westlake can be rebuilt into something you'd be proud of again. By Sunday evening, I had reached my decision. Before communicating it to the board, I made two important calls. The first was to Rachel Dawson. They want me to come back in a senior leadership role, I explained. One of my conditions would be bringing back key people who left because they refused to compromise their integrity. Would you consider returning as our controller? Her hesitation was understandable. That's unexpected. Who would I be reporting to? Directly to me initially, and I report to the board until a new CEO is appointed. Complete independence from the previous structure. Let me think about it, she said, but I could hear cautious interest in her voice. My second call was to Dr. Patel, who had been working through the weekend to distribute updated cardioflow safety information to physicians. How are you holding up? I asked. Exhausted, but relieved, he replied. The response from the medical community has been remarkably understanding. Most appreciate the transparency, even if it's belated. They just want the truth so they can properly care for their patients. I explained the role I was considering. I'd need a strong medical affairs partnership to rebuild the bridge between sales and healthcare providers. Would you be willing to work with me on that? Without hesitation, he said immediately. What Reynolds and Davidson never understood is that ethical sales and good medicine aren't opposing forces. They're complementary. When doctors trust us, everyone benefits, including shareholders. His words crystallized my thinking. On Monday morning, I called Margaret Chen and accepted the position with one additional request, that my first official communication would be a company-wide address to all employees, explaining the changes and reaffirming Westlake's core values. She readily agreed. When can you start? I'm already started, I replied. 2 days later, I stood before hundreds of Westlake employees in the company's main auditorium, with hundreds more watching via video conference from facilities around the country. The room was tense with uncertainty. Rumors had been swirling, executives had disappeared, but no official explanation had been provided. I began simply, "My name is Richard Harmon. Many of you know me from my 25 years leading Westlake's sales organization. Others know me only as an executive who left abruptly last week. Today marks a new chapter for Westlake Pharmaceuticals, a return to the values that built this company and a commitment to earning back the trust of healthcare providers, patients, employees, and investors." Over the next 30 minutes, I explained the situation with appropriate transparency, not dwelling on individual wrongdoing, but clearly outlining the practices that would be changing and why they mattered. I introduced the newly formed corporate integrity team, including Rachel Dawson, who had agreed to return, and outlined the board's commitments to supporting ethical business practices. Some will see these changes as a setback or a retreat from aggressive growth, I acknowledged. I see them differently. Sustainable success in pharmaceuticals isn't built on financial engineering or sales tactics. It's built on creating medications that genuinely improve lives and on relationships with healthcare providers who trust us to be honest partners in patient care. As I spoke, I could see tension visibly draining from the room, replaced by cautious optimism. People who had been fearfully wondering about their jobs and the company's future were beginning to see a path forward. This transition won't be easy, I concluded. We have damaged relationships to repair, systems to restructure, and trust to rebuild. But Westlake's greatest asset has always been its people. The researchers developing life-saving medications, the manufacturing teams ensuring perfect quality, the sales professionals who understand that their real job is education, not persuasion. I paused, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I believe in what we can be, what we should be, and what we will be again. I'm asking each of you to join me in this renewal, not just following new policies, but actively embodying the values that make our work meaningful. Together, we'll rebuild Westlake into something we can all be profoundly proud of. The applause that followed wasn't the polite acknowledgement typical of corporate presentations. It was the emotional response of people who had been working under increasing ethical strain, now seeing a path back to the mission that had brought many of them to Westlake in the first place. Afterward, dozens of employees approached me individually, some to share concerns about practices they'd observed, others simply to express relief or gratitude. A research scientist in her 50s gripped my hand firmly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been developing medications here for 20 years. For the first time in 2 years, I'm not thinking about updating my resume." Jason found me as the crowd thinned. "That," he said with a grin, "was a masterclass in leadership." "The hard part starts now," I reminded him. "Words are important, but actions are what matter." The weeks that followed were intensely challenging. We discovered that the financial misrepresentations were even more extensive than initially identified. The forensic accountants eventually determined that approximately $147 million in revenue had been improperly recognized over 6 quarters, nearly 8% of reported sales during that period. Working closely with the board, external auditors, and regulatory counsel, we prepared financial restatements and developed a comprehensive remediation plan. The stock price took a significant hit when we announced the issues publicly, but the transparency of our approach was generally well received by analysts who recognized the new leadership was addressing problems rather than perpetuating them. Rebuilding the sales organization proved to be both the most challenging and rewarding aspect of the transformation. I personally met with each regional sales director, evaluating not just their performance metrics, but their approach to client, relationships, and ethical boundaries. Some had to be replaced, too thoroughly indoctrinated in Reynolds and Davidson's aggressive tactics. Others emerged as champions of the renewed focus on integrity, relieved to return to an approach they'd always believed in. We developed new training programs emphasizing medical education rather than pure sales techniques, and revised compensation structures to reward appropriate prescribing patterns rather than raw volume. Dr. Patel became a crucial partner in this effort, helping to create a new framework for how medical information flowed through the organization. We established clear protocols, ensuring that safety data was promptly communicated to prescribers, with sales representatives trained to actively discuss both benefits and risks rather than minimizing concerns. 3 months into the transformation, we received our first significant validation that the approach was working. Baptist Health System, a major hospital network that had been reducing its Westlake purchases under Reynolds' leadership, signed a comprehensive 3-year agreement after extensive discussions about our renewed commitment to transparency. The lead pharmacist pulled me aside after the signing. "Your sales team has been notably different these past few months," he said. "They're actually listening to our concerns rather than just pushing product. It reminds me of how Westlake operated years ago. That evening I shared this feedback with Catherine over dinner. "It's working," I said, still somewhat amazed. "Slowly, but it's working." She raised her glass. "To second acts, and to the courage to demand better." Looking back now, a year into Westlake's transformation, I can see how being fired after 25 years became the catalyst for the most meaningful phase of my career. The company has appointed a new CEO, a respected pharmaceutical executive with a strong ethical reputation. But I've remained in my role overseeing corporate integrity, a position that has become a model studied by other organizations facing similar challenges. Financial results have gradually improved as trust has been rebuilt, particularly with major hospital systems who value predictable, ethical partnerships over aggressive sales tactics. The stock hasn't fully recovered to its artificially inflated highs under Reynolds, but it's on a sustainable upward trajectory based on genuine performance rather than manipulated numbers. Most gratifying has been watching employees rediscover their pride in Westlake. The annual Employee Satisfaction Survey revealed a remarkable transformation in morale, with ethical leadership and meaningful work cited as the most improved areas. Last week I addressed a graduating class of pharmaceutical science students at Northeastern University. One asked what advice I'd give to those entering the industry. My answer came easily. Technical skills matter, market knowledge matters. But most essential is the courage to stand for integrity, especially when doing so comes at personal risk. In 25 years of leadership, I learned that success without ethics isn't success at all. It's merely postponed failure. And sometimes, what initially seems like the end of your story is actually the beginning of your most important chapter. When I think about that Thursday afternoon when Gloria told me my position had been eliminated, I no longer feel any trace of the anger or betrayal that initially consumed me. Instead, I recognize it as the moment that ultimately allowed me to transform not just my own career, but an entire organization's approach to its mission. Being fired after 25 years didn't define me. How I responded to it did. And in that response, I found a purpose even more meaningful than the considerable success I'd achieved before. Sometimes losing what you thought mattered reveals what truly does. 6 months into my new role as Executive Vice President of Corporate Integrity and Sales Excellence at Westlake, I found myself standing at a podium I never expected to occupy again. The American Pharmaceutical Association had invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual ethics conference, a testament to how our transformation at Westlake was reverberating throughout the industry. Looking out at the sea of executives, researchers, and regulatory professionals, I took a moment to reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. When I was unceremoniously escorted from Westlake Pharmaceuticals after 25 years of service, I began, I had 2 choices. I could walk away with my severance package and find another position, or I could stand up for the values that had guided my entire career. What I didn't realize then was that this moment of professional crisis would become the most defining opportunity of my life. The crowd leaned forward slightly. Many had heard rumors of the Westlake turnaround story, but few knew the personal dimension. Today, I want to share not just what happened, but why it matters for every person in this room, because the challenges we faced at Westlake aren't unique. They represent the fundamental tension in our industry, the constant balancing act between profit pressures and patient welfare, between quarterly results and long-term integrity. As I shared our story, strategically omitting confidential details while conveying the essential lessons, I noticed many executives taking unusually detailed notes. The pharmaceutical industry was facing increasing scrutiny over pricing practices, marketing approaches, and safety disclosures. Our experience offered a roadmap for navigating these waters with integrity intact. The financial impact of our transformation has been remarkable, I explained, displaying a slide that showed Westlake's recovery trajectory. After an initial 27% stock drop, when we announced our financial restatements, we've now regained all of that value and added 12% more. Why? Because the market ultimately rewards sustainable, ethical business models over short-term manipulation. I emphasized the practical mechanisms we'd implemented, the revised adverse event reporting protocols that Dr. Patel had designed, the enhanced board oversight structures, the new sales training approach that prioritized medical education over pure persuasion. But the most powerful change wasn't structural, I continued. It was cultural. We discovered that when you free people to operate with integrity, when you reward transparency rather than punishing it, performance actually improves. Our sales team is closing more legitimate business now than they ever did under the high-pressure, manipulative approach. After the speech, I was approached by numerous executives seeking more specific guidance. Among them was Sofia Mendez, CEO of Arroyo Pharmaceuticals, one of Westlake's largest competitors. "That was remarkably candid, Richard," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Most people in your position would have crafted a sanitized corporate narrative." "Sanitized narratives don't change anything," I replied, "and change is what our industry desperately needs." She nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to continue this conversation. My board has been pushing for more aggressive quarterly results, and I'm concerned about where that path leads. Could we meet privately while you're in town?" This encounter exemplified how our Westlake story was catalyzing broader industry reflection. By the conference's end, I'd scheduled meetings with 7 pharmaceutical executives facing similar pressures, all seeking guidance on maintaining ethical practices in an increasingly challenging business environment. When I returned to Boston, Catherine greeted me at the airport, her smile reflecting the pride she felt but rarely verbalized. "Your speech is causing quite a stir," she noted, showing me industry publications already featuring quotes from my address. "How does it feel to become a corporate ethics guru?" I laughed at the characterization. Hardly a guru, just someone who learned the hard way that integrity isn't negotiable. As we drove home, I reflected on how dramatically my professional identity had evolved. For 25 years, I'd defined myself by sales achievements, numbers, deals, growth metrics. Now I was finding deeper fulfillment in helping transform not just Westlake, but potentially influencing the broader industry's approach to ethical challenges. The next morning, I arrived at Westlake headquarters earlier than usual, wanting quiet. Time to prepare for a significant milestone, the company's first full board meeting since completing our financial restatements and regulatory settlements. The building hummed with the energy that had been absent during Reynolds' tenure, a sense of mission and purpose that transcended mere commercial ambition. In the executive suite, I found Jason already at his desk. He'd been promoted to Vice President of Sales Operations, a role created specifically to implement our new approach to customer relationships. "Morning, Richard," he called, his enthusiastic energy unchanged despite his increased responsibilities. "The Hospital Association released their annual survey results. Thought you'd want to see this right away." He handed me a report showing that Westlake had regained its position as the most trusted pharmaceutical partner among major hospital systems. A remarkable turnaround from our rating just a year earlier. "This is significant," I said, studying the detailed feedback. "Forward this to the board before today's meeting. It validates everything we've been working toward." As I continued to my office, I passed the wall where we'd mounted our newly articulated corporate values. Not the generic platitudes common in corporate settings, but specific behavioral commitments that employees had helped craft during our renewal process. We tell the truth to doctors, patients, regulators, and each other, even when it's difficult. We measure success by improved patient outcomes, not just financial metrics. We encourage questions and concerns at every level of the organization. We build relationships based on trust, not pressure or manipulation. We take personal responsibility for maintaining our integrity, individually and collectively. These weren't just words on a wall. They were principles we now built into every aspect of our operations, from how we compensated our sales team to how we reported clinical trial results. The board meeting that afternoon reflected how profoundly Westlake had transformed. The new CEO, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, no relation to the politician, had been selected specifically for her background combining scientific expertise with ethical business leadership. Under her guidance, the agenda focused not just on financial performance, but on a balanced assessment of multiple success metrics. "Richard, would you walk us through the sales integrity dashboard?" she asked when we reached that agenda item. I displayed the monitoring system we'd developed to track key indicators of ethical sales practices. Metrics like the accuracy of product claims in field presentations, appropriate targeting of specialists for specific medications, and representative knowledge of safety profiles. "We're seeing consistent improvement across all dimensions," I explained. "Most encouragingly, our sales teams are now regularly reporting when they encounter pressure from healthcare institutions to offer improper incentives, a complete reversal from the previous culture where such opportunities might have been quietly pursued." Board member Samuel Ortiz, the former FDA official, nodded approvingly. "This is precisely the kind of proactive monitoring that prevents regulatory problems before they develop." Have other companies shown interest in adopting this approach? "No, actually, yes," I replied. After my presentation at the ethics conference, 3 major pharmaceutical companies have requested guidance on implementing similar systems. With the board's approval, I'd like to share our framework while keeping proprietary details confidential. Elevating industry standards benefits everyone, including Westlake. The board unanimously supported this approach, another sign of how our corporate philosophy had evolved from the defensive, competitive posture typical under previous leadership. After the meeting, Dr. Warren asked me to join her in her office, the same space that Thomas Reynolds had once occupied, though she'd redesigned it to be more collaborative and less intimidating. "The transformation you've helped lead here is remarkable, Richard," she said, as we settled into the comfortable seating area rather than at her formal desk. "The board has asked me to discuss your long-term role at Westlake." This conversation had been anticipated but deliberately delayed until we'd stabilized the company's situation. The EVP position had initially been created as a transitional role focused on the immediate crisis. "I've been giving that considerable thought myself," I admitted. "The urgent work of correction is largely complete. The systems and cultural changes are well established. The question is where I can add the most value going forward." Elizabeth nodded. "Exactly. You could return to leading sales, of course. The organization would welcome that. Or we could expand your current role to focus more on industry leadership and external engagement. The board has authorized me to offer you the path with appropriate compensation adjustments. The choice before me crystallized something I'd been contemplating for months. My fulfillment no longer came from driving sales numbers or even from the corporate transformation itself. It came from the opportunity to influence broader change throughout an industry that directly impacted millions of patients' lives. "I'd prefer the expanded integrity and industry leadership role," I said, "but with a modification. I'd like to transition to a 4-day work week." Elizabeth looked surprised. That's not a request I expected. I smiled. 25 years of 70-hour weeks gave me plenty of professional accomplishment, but at a personal cost. This transformation has reminded me that integrity isn't just about how we conduct business. It's about honoring all our commitments, including to family and personal well-being. To her credit, she immediately grasped the alignment between this request and the values we'd been championing. A leader modeling genuine work-life balance would be powerful for our culture. Let's make it happen. The new role evolved rapidly over the following months. Beyond my continued oversight of Westlake's integrity systems, I began working with industry associations to develop standardized ethics frameworks that companies could adopt and measure themselves against. I established a quarterly roundtable where ethics officers from competing pharmaceutical companies could share challenges and best practices in a non-competitive environment. Most satisfyingly, I created a mentorship program pairing experienced pharmaceutical professionals with emerging leaders specifically focused on ethical business practices, helping to develop the next generation of industry executives who would prioritize integrity alongside innovation and growth. Catherine noticed the change in me immediately. "You're more energized about work than I've seen you in years," she observed one evening as we walked along the harbor, something we now did regularly with my more balanced schedule. "Yet you're actually working less. It's the difference between pushing sales numbers and advancing a purpose," I replied. "For decades, I was good at my job, but now I'm fulfilling a calling. That's energizing in an entirely different way." The 4-day schedule allowed me to finally engage with community organizations I'd always supported financially, but never had time to serve personally. I joined the board of a non-profit focused on medication access for underserved populations, bringing my pharmaceutical expertise to help them negotiate better arrangements with manufacturers. Jason continued to thrive in his expanded role, frequently seeking my guidance, but increasingly confident in his own leadership approach. "I'm building my own reference notebooks now," he told me one day, showing me the detailed client relationship records he maintained. Learned from the best. Approximately 1 year after my dismissal and subsequent return to Westlake, an unexpected opportunity arose. The Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, PHRMA, the industry's primary trade association, approached me about leading a new ethics and integrity initiative. The role would involve working with member companies to establish stronger self-regulation practices, potentially influencing the entire industry's approach to sales, marketing, and clinical transparency. The timing felt significant. After decades of focusing my energy on one company's success, I now had the chance to help reshape practices across the entire pharmaceutical landscape. The position would allow me to maintain my connection with Westlake through board service while expanding my impact exponentially. When I discussed the opportunity with Dr. Warren, she was immediately supportive. "You've guided Westlake through its darkest period into a new era of ethical leadership. This is a natural evolution of your influence." The board unanimously approved a special arrangement allowing me to accept the PHRMA position while continuing as a Westlake board member and special advisor. Recognition of my unique contribution to the company's renewal. The transition was announced at a company town hall that felt worlds away from the tense, uncertain gathering I'd addressed when we first revealed the ethical breaches under Reynolds' leadership. This time, the atmosphere was confident, even celebratory. "When I was escorted from this building after 25 years of service," I told the assembled employees, "I couldn't have imagined standing here today announcing this new chapter. The journey from that moment to this one holds lessons I'll carry for the rest of my career. I paused, looking out at faces that had gone from fearful to engaged over the course of our transformation. First, integrity isn't just a corporate value statement. It's a personal choice we make daily, sometimes at significant cost. Second, organizations are ultimately collections of individuals making those choices. When enough people choose integrity, even entrenched corruption can be overcome. And finally, what initially appears to be career disaster can become your greatest opportunity for meaningful impact. The applause that followed wasn't just for me, but for the collective journey we'd taken together, from a company compromising its principles to one leading its industry in ethical practices. In my final week at Westlake before beginning the HRMA role, I made a point of visiting each department, expressing personal gratitude to the employees whose commitment had made our transformation possible. In the sales department, I found myself in my original territory, the Northeast region I'd built from nothing 25 years earlier. The current regional director, Michael Chen, had been a junior representative when I was first leading the department. "You know what's remarkable?" he said as we reviewed the region's performance. "Our numbers now are actually better than during the Reynolds era, but they're real. No manipulation, no channel stuffing, no phantom sales, just genuine relationships with healthcare providers who trust us." "That's how it's supposed to work," I replied. "Trust creates sustainable success. Manipulation only creates temporary illusions." My final stop was the executive floor where my termination had occurred 18 months earlier. Gloria Parker, who had delivered the news that day, had remained. As HR director through our transformation, she'd proven valuable during the rebuilding phase, apparently having been uncomfortable with Reynolds' approach, but unwilling to risk her position by speaking up. As I passed her office, she called out to me, "Richard, do you have a moment?" I entered, noting how her demeanor had changed from the tense, avoiding eye contact administrator who had handed me termination papers to a more confident professional. "I've wanted to say this for some time," she began, somewhat awkwardly. "What happened that day? The way it was handled. I should have pushed back harder on the process." I nodded, appreciating her acknowledgement. "We all face moments that test our courage, Gloria. The important thing is learning from them." "I have," she said firmly. "Your example changed how I approach my responsibilities. When executives now suggest terminating employees without proper cause or process, I push back forcefully. I keep thinking, what would Richard expect in this situation?" This conversation crystallized something I'd been reflecting on throughout my farewell tour. My greatest legacy at Westlake wasn't the sales organization I'd built, or even the corporate transformation I'd helped lead. It was the change in how people approached their individual ethical responsibilities, the ripple effect of one person standing firmly for integrity when it would have been easier to walk away. On my final day, Catherine suggested we drive to the harbor where I'd sat in my car after being terminated, processing the shock and beginning to formulate my response. The contrast between that moment and now couldn't have been more profound. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, as we looked out at the boats navigating the channel. "How differently this all could have gone," I replied honestly. I could have just taken another job, filed away the evidence of wrongdoing, moved on with my career. So many people do exactly that when faced with ethical challenges. "But that wouldn't have been you," she said simply. She was right. Throughout my 25-year career, I'd faced countless smaller ethical decision points, moments where compromising would have been expedient, but ultimately corrosive to my professional identity. Those daily choices had forged the character that made my response to termination almost inevitable. I couldn't have walked away from the wrongdoing at Westlake because that would have meant walking away from who I'd become over decades of professional life. My first day at HRMA brought a surprising visitor, Thomas Reynolds himself. He'd secured a position at a smaller pharmaceutical company after regulatory investigations had concluded without criminal charges, though his reputation remained severely damaged. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said as he approached me. At the industry reception following my introduction as the new ethics initiative leader. "Probably not," he acknowledged, the arrogance gone from his demeanor. "I'm here because my new company insisted all executives attend this ethics relaunch." He hesitated. "I underestimated you, Richard, catastrophically." "You underestimated the power of integrity," I corrected him. "That was your fundamental mistake." He nodded slightly. "Well, congratulations on your rise from the ashes. Impressive second act." As he walked away, I realized he still didn't truly understand. This wasn't about personal vindication or career resurrection. It was about standing for principles that transcended any individual role or company. Reynolds still viewed everything through the lens of personal advancement rather than purpose. The contrast clarified my mission at PHRMA. Beyond specific ethical frameworks or compliance mechanisms, the pharmaceutical industry needed a fundamental shift in how it defined success, moving from narrow financial metrics to a more balanced evaluation that included patient outcomes, healthcare provider trust, and long-term sustainability. Later that week, I addressed my first PHRMA board meeting, comprising CEOs from the largest pharmaceutical companies in America. Many were skeptical about enhanced self-regulation, viewing it as potentially constraining their business flexibility. "Gentlemen and ladies," I began, "I understand your concerns. For 25 years, I led sales organizations focused relentlessly on growth. I appreciated regulatory flexibility and resisted constraints on our commercial approach." This acknowledgement of our shared perspective seemed to reduce some of the defensiveness in the room. But I've also witnessed firsthand how the pursuit of growth without ethical guardrails ultimately destroys value. Westlake Pharmaceuticals lost over $1 billion in market capitalization when its integrity breaches were exposed. The recovery has been arduous and costly. That pattern repeats across our industry regularly, yet we resist the very measures that would prevent these cycles. I outline my vision not for restrictive regulations, but for principles-based frameworks that companies could adapt to their specific situations while maintaining core ethical commitments. "This isn't about limiting our commercial success," I concluded. "It's about ensuring that success is built on foundations that won't collapse when exposed to scrutiny. It's about recognition that in healthcare particularly, trust is our most valuable asset. Once lost, it costs far more to rebuild than it would have to maintain." The discussion that followed was vigorous but constructive. These were sophisticated business leaders who understood risk management, the opportunity to shape self-regulation, rather than have more stringent measures imposed externally resonated with their pragmatic instincts. By meeting's end, I'd secured their commitment to the first phase of the initiative, a comprehensive assessment of current practices across member companies and the development of improved standards for clinical trial transparency, a particularly contentious area where trust had eroded significantly. As I left PHRMA headquarters that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Jason. Quarterly numbers came in. Second consecutive record legitimate sales quarter. The Westlake way works. I smiled, appreciating this tangible validation that ethical business wasn't just morally right, but commercially sound. That evidence would be powerful in my new role, helping to convince industry leaders that integrity and profitability weren't competing values, but complementary forces. Looking back now, 2 years after that fateful day, when Gloria told me my position had been eliminated, I'm struck by how what seemed like an ending became the beginning of something far more meaningful than I could have imagined. Had I remained, In my SVP sales role, I would have continued making valuable contributions to Westlake's success. But being forced out and choosing to fight back with integrity rather than surrender to bitterness created the opportunity to influence not just one company, but an entire industry's approach to ethical challenges. The journey taught me that career setbacks, even devastating ones, often contain seeds of transformation if we respond with courage and principle rather than fear or compromise. My 25 years of sales leadership provided the credibility and expertise that made my voice powerful when I finally used it for industry-wide change. Most importantly, I learned that professional legacy isn't measured in titles achieved or compensation earned, but in the standards we establish, the people we develop, and the positive changes we catalyze. By that measure, being fired became the most fortunate misfortune of my career, the crisis that ultimately revealed my true purpose. When pharmaceutical executives now ask me for advice on navigating ethical challenges, I tell them that integrity isn't just about following rules or avoiding scandals. It's about building organizations where people can align their personal values with their professional responsibilities, where doing the right thing is celebrated rather than penalized. That alignment creates not just more ethical companies, but more successful and sustainable ones. It attracts and retains the best talent, builds durable relationships with customers and regulators, and creates the kind of corporate culture where innovation flourishes because people aren't afraid to speak truth at all levels. The board meeting where I presented the hidden reports that Reynolds had suppressed wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing. It was about demonstrating an alternative path forward, showing that courage and integrity, even at personal risk, ultimately create more value than compromise and expediency. That's the lesson I carry forward into each new challenge, and the legacy I hope to leave in an industry that touches countless lives through the medications it develops and distributes. Being fired after 25 years didn't end my professional journey. It revealed its true purpose. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.